Welcome to the latest episode of the Show Report, your weekly show through the 2025 season, diving into Maryland football. I'm Ahmed Gafir, back again with Ben Strober and Ricky Welch, and the streak continues. Maryland fell to 4-6, 1-6 overall, with now a 6-game losing streak intact as Maryland went out to Champaign in the final road game of the 2025 season, the 24-6 loss. Bleak showing. Obviously, Maryland had some opportunities there. I thought there was, a little bit of good, but obviously, like we said, the end result, uncompetitive game for the third consecutive week. Tough one, but like we said, guys, it's been a tough season. But what kind of stuck out to you guys in the loss, takeaway or concern?
Nothing's really a concern at this point because I think all of us here know who we are. We know what this Maryland team is. They've, kind of shown their true hand throughout conference play here. I guess I was a little bit impressed with how they defended the run in the first half of the game. I was a bit worried they were going to wear down in the second half, and ultimately that is exactly what happened. So, in those short bursts where you see them tackling well, you see them flying around to the football, the defensive front looks decent. It looks like maybe that can help them compete a little bit more on the defensive side, but I think still my concern is they can't sustain it for a full 4 quarters, and a big part of that is because the offense hasn't played well enough to keep the defense off the field enough where it's just very easy for the defense to wear down. So I guess it's not really even a concern for me at this point because we know that's kind of what we're going to see week in, week out. But just something I noticed.
Kind of a tale of two different teams and where they're at on Saturday when you had a great finish in the basketball game after their best player goes out, and you see the heart and the drive of that team under a first-year head coach. And then, the game's going on the other side, and they're wiltering away. And like Ben said, there's not much more to really take away. We're 10 games through a 12-game season, only 2 games left. It's kind of just been the same the last few weeks, especially through conference play. Defense, I thought, showed a little bit of heart. That fourth down stop was nice. But again, just the offense. I'll go to the offense side. They just can't score in the red zone. It's been a problem all year. Another huge problem late. They're down 2 scores. Could have made it a 1-score game late. Couldn't get there on a first and goal situation. Drops are getting seemingly worse by the week somehow. We thought that would be fixed Loxley by now. And the run game goes back to being what it was most of the season, 3.1 yards per carry. Just the same themes over and over again. The offense, the pass blocking is good. It is there. But then Malik's a lot of passes swatted down to the line this week. I don't know if that's a problem. The way he's delivering the ball seems to be it. He's not a height issue. It kind of seems to be the way he's delivering the ball. Maybe it's also a product of all the crossing patterns that we're running and similar short route plays. But the offense is a total play calling, execution, just not where it needs to be to win in this conference, especially with the style of coach Loxley is. You want to score some points in the quarterback talent you have. So, again, more of the same from the offense.
Yeah, I think that's understandable, and I was going to a little bit what I talked about, obviously, in the outline. I mean, I joked about pre-game or pre-show with you guys. I wrote nothing that hasn't already been said. And I think really what sticks out is kind of what I highlighted on the IBG Twitter account after the game. Maryland for the 3rd consecutive week has allowed over 200 yards on the ground. It's the 5th consecutive week. If you bump it to 190 yards, Maryland allowed 193 rushing yards consecutive weeks against both Washington and Nebraska. So that's a concern. I think Bryce Jenkins. I thought he maybe had the most flashes that he's had really through conference play, and I think he's big. But I think it's pretty clear that getting the depth up to par and really getting some size in the trenches is going to be a focus for them. And then Ricky, you kind of touched on it, but I thought this was kind of a chance to see how the run game is able to bounce back after the 300-yard rushing game against Rutgers the week prior. Like you said, to finish with 55 yards, I think that is kind of maybe just emphasizing really a big piece of what Maryland needs to kind of focus on this offseason when it comes to, getting support, getting weapons around Malik Washington, and being able to, create the balance, like Loxley says, and I think it's up for debate, but balance isn't the ability to pass well and run well; it's the ability to do both. Right now, Maryland really, and for a couple of years now, Maryland has not shown that ability to run the ball, to be balanced. So I think it's a little bit tough to kind of see that week in, week out. And again, I think it'll be interesting to see how Maryland adjusts with that. If Maryland can kind of take that next step as a run blocking team, get a couple guys back in the offensive line. But I think it's a was not an encouraging performance when you consider the next matchup. When you got Michigan coming up, who is one of the best teams in the country running the ball, and one of the best teams at stopping the run. So I think that will be interesting. But before we dive too much into next week's, I thought this weekend, obviously about 15 hours after Maryland's sixth consecutive loss, AD Jim Smith came out in a letter of support for Maryland head coach Mike Loxley to return in 2026. Made the commitment to talk about additional resources for the program, something that's obviously been talked about for years for Maryland. So the timing, I think, was a little bit interesting. Maybe needed to be done, but curious to hear what your guys' perspective on the letter as a whole and maybe the timing of it. Ben, we'll start with you.
Well, when the Baltimore Sun tried to get the scoop from Jim Smith what the plans might be this offseason, Jim Smith pushed back and said, we're not making a decision on that during the season. Why would we do that? We're going to wait until the season's over. So for them to come out and do it after a sixth straight loss, the timing, as you mentioned, is very peculiar in this situation. You have to imagine that Zion Ely and his camp, with more visits potentially looming for him, maybe they showed their hand a little bit and say, like, hey, we want to see some stability. Like, is Locks going to be around next year or not? We kind of need to know. And if that's indeed the case, like, I understand why they made that decision. And the amount of openings there are in college football right now, Maryland would not rank very high on the list of jobs that would become open if it were to move on from Mike Loxley. So I kind of knew that this might be a possibility. And I made the case last week saying, how do you possibly sell an eighth year of Mike Loxley when I think a lot of the fan base has grown, tired and thinks that they've hit the ceiling with him and they kind of know who he is as a head coach? Well, that sell is we're going to pour more resources into the program. Loxley went up there, said, we're not going to complain. We've never moaned about resources, so we feel like we've been set up to make bowl games, but winning has a cost. Well, we're going to see. They're going to get put to the test next year. It's going to be a sink or swim type of year for this program. If they're not able to find any resemblance of success, maybe whether that's getting to a bowl game or even exceeding that level of success next year, then you're going to have a real big decision to make at that point, because this is the sell right now. You're trying to sell the hopes and dreams to the fan base that you're going to spend legitimate money here in NIL and make this team a competitor. We'll see.
Yeah, I wanted to say, you said like that, a lot of job openings right now, and I agree. This is like an unprecedented amount. Virginia Tech gets filled up. I'm sure we can touch on that later with James Franklin. But I think mostly every year some job comes open, and most of the time Maryland's going to be pretty down the food chain. So I don't know if obviously this year it's a little bit special with how many teams are doing it, but I feel like most of the years Maryland will not be the job or even probably a top 4 job that is available at any given time. Just the state of the nation here in Maryland. Then also the timing, a little weird. Like Ben said, he talked about it earlier. They're not going to do it, but I think there was a lot of pushing factors. And Jim Smith, again, this is his first year. This would be a huge splash move to get rid of a coach, especially when you have all this young talent. I think he's going to let him breathe it out a little bit. And is that the right choice? I'm on the side that, I said last week, that I don't really see the results in the past to warrant keeping him around for an 8th year, even with all this young talent, because he hasn't done much with it in the past. But however, in terms of the funding, I think that's the main driver of all this. You talk about the buyout. You're talking about losing certain money that there's not a lot of it to potentially grow the roster. I think they're making a business decision here to keep a coach, to use their resources on the roster rather than paying for a new coach and buying out the current coach. And this financial situation as well, they've been talking about it for years, ever since NIL started, especially in the last few years, that they're going to grow the resources. They're going to grow the resources. I'm not in the inner workings of the program, but I haven't seen it in terms of on-field results and on-field roster construction yet. So I don't know where this money is coming from. I think it's kind of like a chicken and egg sort of thing. You got to get the wins on the field first to get these higher end boosters to kind of buy into the program, like you're seeing with Mark Cuban over in Indiana. He didn't buy into Indiana until like this year after they had already won, and now they're stepping up even more. So if you're going to get these boosters to help with the football program to the level that you want, I think you got to start winning first with a roster that's not really there, and that's just how it's going to be. And that's the job Loxley has.
Yeah, I think you actually both kind of hit on it, and I think that this was kind of the expected, expected. Most likely, I think that's the best way to phrase it. Kind of like we talked about last show. I think people at the top, were more willing to pour more in rather than restart, which is understandable and probably a good sign. In terms of where Maryland would rank in terms of jobs, I agree. I don't think even in I think this year obviously a lot of marquee job openings, and we'll see. Lincoln Riley, USC continues to pop up as well, so I think that'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. But I think what can kind of change for Maryland is this next 6 to 12 months, when you kind of are able to show a little bit more commitment to the resources. You're going to have to go into the portal. You're going to have to overpay. That's going to be the nature after coming off potentially consecutive 4-win seasons. Though I think that they'll be able to pull out the regular season finale for a fifth win to make this a very confusing season. But I think the timing of it, like you mentioned, Ben, Zion Ely, yeah, that was a growing concern. And I specifically heard, the continued articles and reaction to Mike Loxley, his era, his tenure. I think that kind of started to, raise a little bit of red flags behind the scenes. And again, I think, the talk about Texas officially visiting doesn't really seem to materialize just yet. It sounds like nothing is yet. And the source told me that Zion's actually expected back at Maryland this weekend for the regular home season finale versus Michigan. I do think the timing did kind of play a role. I did think it was kind of interesting, like you said, Ben, just for Jim to make that reversal 1 week later. But I think it kind of provides some closure and a little bit of certainty as to kind of what the next steps are. But I will say this, I think after 7 years of kind of seeing the recruiting and if what if you see this development, and that's not to say I mean with this young core you're expecting to see development. I think Malik Washington, Sidney Stewart, Zahir Mathis, retaining all of them as priority number one. And I think being able to surround the talent, but I think the vast majority of Maryland fans are just going to be in wait and see mode. They're going to have to wait to see that big win, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle to get much interest in the program over the next year. Be interested to see how much Maryland kind of views or kind of takes in the feedback through the season and maybe adjusts their exposure maybe through the off season into spring ball. What types of different opportunities they do to kind of help move the needle a little bit after another disappointing year. But like we said, I think that this was kind of the most likely outcome in terms of just how Maryland works. But Ricky, you mentioned you haven't seen this through the years, and I think really for Maryland, this is you didn't have an AD like Jim Smith in the past. I think Jim Smith really tries to put some weight behind his actions, and obviously, the words and the visibility is there. But Damon, it's night and day. And I'll always, tell people, I think, what if Jim Smith and Mike Loxley got here at the same time? Would have been interesting to see having an AD that, just really pounding the pavement for you day in, day out, rather than do radio interviews and fluff pieces. But yeah, I think it is a tough reality for Maryland right now. And like we said, it'll be a tough one this weekend against 18th ranked Michigan, second ranked opponent this season. It'll be a 4 p.m. kickoff on BTN. Like we said, this will be a tough matchup. The matchup between a pair of true freshman quarterbacks, and Bryce Underwood and Malik Washington. Jay Barham coming back to College Park one more time. It'll be the third game facing a former Terp this season. Guys, what sticks out to you guys in this matchup going into Saturday?
You said the quarterback matchup, and that's what I put in the outline just because I think that's been one of the more intriguing stories is the two true freshman quarterbacks starting in the Big Ten Conference this year and how people have kind of monitored how each of those guys have performed. It's been a little bit of a tail off for Malik as of recently, but same can be said for Bryce Underwood. He has not really played well as of recently. He hasn't thrown a touchdown since October 18th, has thrown a couple of interceptions in that time frame as well. With Maryland, how bad they've been defensively for the most part over the past 5 or 6 weeks. Maybe you see a situation where Bryce Underwood uses this as like a get right game or something like that. But hopefully you can see this Maryland defense put a little bit of pressure on him, see that secondary come up with another interception. They've been good at turning the ball over this year. You got to give Maryland's defense a lot of credit for that. They've turned the ball over a ton of times this year, but it obviously hasn't led to the result they've hoped for, which that being wins. We'll see what Bryce Underwood has to the table. We'll see if Malik Washington can maybe give some reassurance after a couple of lackluster performances here.
Easily the biggest storyline is what you said, Ben, is the two freshman quarterbacks going at it, 5-star, Malik, top 50 recruit. But I'll also go back to what we were just talking about. Will this coaching announcement give the team a jolt? It's kind of what I said last week with this whole talk where they fight for their coach. They have not yet. But you kind of start with Wisconsin. I believe their only conference win was right after they announced Fickle's coming back. They beat Washington the week after. So can we get something similar? My guess is no. But there's been a lot of talk, obviously, with Locks. The fans want him out, a lot of chatter. And I'm sure they know it inside the walls. It's been kind of hard to ignore. And obviously this letter now, can they fight for their coach? Can they fight as a program and say, hey, we're still here? They have clearly not done that yet for the past few weeks. Can they finally show a little something? Like I said, my guess is no, but that's something to monitor again in these. I mean, they're still fighting for bowl eligibility, believe it or not, but I would tend to assume no, but I guess we'll see how it looks after this huge announcement with a lot of freshmen that seemingly would come back to play for this head coach.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. And Ricky, you actually used the perfect example. I was going to say Wisconsin. I think it was the 23rd ranked Washington a couple of days later. I am interested to see that. The consistency is that, the locker room is not to the same level in the slightest as it was last year. I mean, last year it really deteriorated at this point. And I think this is kind of the last time. You look at guys like Jalen Husky, Cam Rice. Obviously, Cam was a transfer, but I think a lot of these seniors kind of have some pride, and I think it'll be kind of interesting to see, whether that kind of translates onto the field. But Maryland is definitely banged up. Daniel Wingate, he is battling right now. I know Cindy Stewart was able to go last week. Zahir Mathis has been battling through it as well. But I think it'll be kind of interesting to see. But like we said, I think on the offensive side of the ball, I think how does Maryland kind of stay efficient? How are they kind of able to really kind of get that success kind of going and trying to get comfortable. I'm curious to see how they open up on their on their opening possession on offense there. But like we said, I think it will be interesting. Maryland is a 14.5-point underdog at home. They do not fare well when home underdogs under Mike Loxley. But we will dive into our score predictions. But before that, we are sponsored by the Catalyst Hot Dogs. Catalyst brought the Jersey Dog to the DMV, featuring premium dry-aged Black Angus all-beef hot dogs made in Maryland, served with handmade toppings including hot onions, relish, and their signature Texas chili sauce. And don't miss their original garlic knot dogs. Catalyst always offers vegan dogs as well as gluten-free buns because Catalyst has food for everyone. Make sure to find them in CQ Stadium in Section 14 and the Xfinity Center in Section 210. And make sure to tell the people a hot dog is a sandwich. And with that, we will dive into one thing we're looking at on Saturday and whether any of us are predicting Maryland to end the losing streak. Ben, do the honors.
All right, all right. Michigan, I think, wins this one 31-7. I think offensively, Maryland's just a bit out of sorts right now. I can see the surprise on Ricky's face. I think it's just been that kind of season. You're at that point right now where nothing's gone their way, and I know Ricky expects maybe you see a slight jolt. I'm not seeing it right now. I've seen crazier things though. I've seen this team compete as underdogs at times in a home environment against a good team. Do I see it happening Saturday, though? I just don't. That's just what I view right now. I think if Maryland wants to have a chance in this one, they're just going to have to keep the defense off the field as much as possible. And that's pretty much easier said than done because Michigan's one of the better teams running the football in the country. And that's obviously been one of the Achilles heels of this Maryland defense this year is the inability to stop the run. But in all honesty, it's going to fall into the offense to sustain some drives in this game. And maybe you're not going to come away with 7 on every drive. But, you have a pretty reliable kicker here in Sean O'Hare. If you can sustain a couple drives, pick up a couple first downs, work the clock as much as possible, maybe you get 3 on some of those drives. Give your defense an opportunity to be off the field for some time because if you have them out there consistently throughout the entirety of this game, they will wear down and it will get ugly.
Yeah, just quickly, I said it's a storyline to watch if there's a jolt. I don't think there's going to be a jolt, just Ben, but yeah. This is traditional. We've seen this spot a lot in the Loxley tenure, where it's the Michigan Ohio State the week before the big game, and we get them at home. And we've the last one being Michigan when they won the national championship, and same with Ohio State. Or they didn't win that year, but we kept it kind of close in both games. So traditionally, it's been a decent spot that makes some noise and close to being an upset. But my catalyst is going to have to go to the defensive side, and specifically Jalen Husky. The senior safety will be honored on Senior Day. I feel like on this podcast and maybe just around, he hasn't talked about a lot, like as enough as he should be. The guy's been stellar all year. He's definitely the heart of the defense. Daniel Wingate as well, but he's there in run fit. He's fantastic inside when he gets inside the box and as a safety. He obviously makes plays. Interception last week as well, and you see he's like probably one of the captains of the team. Like I know they don't name captains for the whole season, but he has seems like he has a presence in the locker room and is a true leader out there, and he really puts his heart into a lot of games. So I love him as a player. It's going to be sad to see him go. Especially with this Michigan being a great running team, him getting in there and really filling up the run holes, kind of like Bo Braid did 2 years ago against Michigan, was just stellar in getting Michigan off the field to get the offense some chances. And like Ben said, they're a fantastic running team, and going to have to keep the defense off the field. I don't think the offense can do that, so the defense is going to try to keep it as much as possible. It's possible to keep it close with Michigan. Obviously, last week they were in a tight one with Northwestern. Bryce Underwood has struggled for the most part in putting up big numbers. I know they're kind of not throwing the ball a ton and getting them out and really opening up the playbook for them, but Michigan is beatable. It's not the best matchup for Maryland in their style of play and their ability to give a big chunk run plays, but I think this will be closer than the spread says, but it's still a double-digit loss. I'll go Michigan 27, Maryland 17. Might be 20 actually for us, but second thought.
No, I was gonna say, Ricky, you brought up a good point. Michigan and Ohio State. Maryland's kind of done a good job, kind of playing them close, mostly the last couple of years, especially that week before the big game there. But I think it'll be interesting. I think the one aspect that I think is maybe a little bit optimistic is I think this Michigan offense is pretty inconsistent this year. I think Bryce Underwood has kind of had some ebbs and flows, and the rushing attack is a little bit banged up going into this one. Obviously they'll still be leaning on that rushing attack, but I think it'll be kind of interesting to see if this front seven, if they can kind of, like we said, kind of get some inspiration. But I do think it's gonna be tough for Maryland. I go Wolverines 30-13 on Senior night. I think again, I think it'd be a disappointing end, especially you look back at kind of how it goes. But I think that Michigan's got the offensive line. They've done a really good job this season, really opening up those run holes. And for Maryland defense that has been struggling with injuries these last couple of weeks, I think it's tough. But for a 4-quarter stretch, but we will see. As mentioned, kickoff is set for 4 p.m. this Saturday on BTN. Make sure you stay locked in over on InsideTheBlackandGold.net for all your Maryland news, with Big Ten football wrapping up, basketball season continuing into Thanksgiving week, and football recruiting winding down with the key official visitor expected this weekend.